The Duke begs the maid. I need to marry you right now to save my fortune. Sebastian Sterling Pierce collapsed into tears in the main hall of the family's century-old estate, clutching between his trembling hands a yellow document he had discovered just a few hours earlier. His life of privilege was about to crumble because of a forgotten clause in his great-grandfather's will, and only 24 hours remained to avoid complete ruin. That was when he spotted Eleanor Grace Miller crossing the hallway with a tea tray, her steps as silent as always. The young maid, 25 years old, had worked on the property for over a decade, ever since her widowed mother brought her there as a girl to help in the kitchen. Sebastian stood up abruptly, scattering papers across the floor. "Eleanor, I need to speak with you urgently," he said, his voice hoarse with despair. The young woman stopped, startled by the changed tone of her employer. In all those years, he had always been polite and respectful toward her, but he kept the proper distance between their social positions. Something was very wrong. "Yes, Mr. Sebastian. Has something happened?" she asked, setting the tray down on a nearby table. Sebastian glanced around, making sure they were alone. The estate's fine wooden walls seemed like silent witnesses to the most desperate moment of his life. "Elena, I know what I'm about to ask will sound completely absurd, but I need to marry you today, right now." The young woman instinctively stepped back, her brown eyes widening in shock. She thought she had misheard, or that her employer was feeling unwell. "Mr. Sebastian, I don't understand. Please let me explain before you judge my sanity," he interrupted, picking up the yellow document. "This paper here is a copy of my great-grandfather's will, Arthur Sterling Pierce, the founder of this estate. There was a clause that no one in the family knew about, hidden in the final paragraphs." Elena remained silent, watching his growing nervousness. She had never seen Sebastian so agitated. Even during the difficult moments of managing the estate, he always kept his composure. "The clause states that every heir of the direct lineage must marry before turning 30, or the entire property will be automatically donated to charitable institutions in New York City, and I turn 30 tomorrow at midnight." "But weren't you engaged to General Crawford's daughter?" asked Eleanor, recalling the wedding preparations that had kept the household bustling over the past few weeks. Sebastian ran his hands through his dark hair, messing up his immaculate style. "Penelope ran away during the night. She only left a letter saying she couldn't marry without love, and that she's in love with the town doctor's son. The guests have already been notified. The priest cancelled the ceremony, and my cousins are on their way here thinking they're going to inherit pieces of the estate." Elena felt a tightness in her chest. She knew every corner of that property, every tree, every animal. Her entire life was connected to that place, just like the lives of so many workers who depended on the estate to survive. "And you want to marry me to save the inheritance?" "I know how this sounds, Elena. I know it seems like I'm using you as a last resort, but the truth is," he hesitated, looking deeply into her eyes, "the truth is, I've always had a special fondness for you. I've always respected your intelligence, your dedication, your kindness. Mr. Sebastian, this is madness. We're from completely different worlds. I'm a maid with no education, no family of means. What will people say? People will say whatever they want. But if I don't marry by tomorrow at midnight, there won't be an estate left to worry about. 200 people will lose their jobs, including you and your mother." Elena sat down heavily in an armchair, trying to process the surreal situation. Mrs. Martha, your mother, had worked in the kitchen for 15 years and considered that house her home. All the staff were like one big family. And then, if I accept, what happens after? We stay married forever? Sebastian knelt before her, taking her calloused hands in his. "We can decide that in the future. For now, I just need a legal marriage that satisfies the will's requirements. I can compensate you financially. I can guarantee that you and your mother will have security for the rest of your lives. It's not about money, Mr. Raphael. It's about dignity, about knowing I'm not being used merely as a convenient object." Loud voices echoed from outside the room. Sebastian stood up quickly, recognizing the voices of his cousins Julian and Victoria Sterling, who lived in New York City and rarely visited the estate. "They arrived earlier than I expected," he muttered. "Elena, please think about my proposal. I understand your hesitation, but time is running out." The door to the room swung open abruptly, and Julian Sterling entered with his usual arrogance. He was a 40-year-old man, a successful lawyer in the city, always dressed in expensive clothes with an expression of superiority on his face. "Cousin Sebastian, what sorrow to hear about the bride's abandonment. We came to offer our support in this difficult time." Victoria appeared right behind him, a 35-year-old woman married to an influential banker. Her eyes gleamed with malice disguised as concern when she saw Eleanor still sitting in the armchair. "My, what a delicate situation. And here you are talking to the maid, while we should be discussing practical solutions for, let's say, the transition of the property." Elena stood up immediately, feeling the contempt in Victoria's voice. "Excuse me, I'll go back to my work." "No, Elena, stay, please," said Sebastian firmly. "Julian, Victoria, I'm glad you came. I have news for you." Julian crossed his arms, his expression curious but calculating. "What kind of news, cousin?" "I'm getting married today. I found a solution for the situation." Victoria let out a forced laugh. "Married? To whom? All the suitable young ladies in the region must already be taken, or—" "To Elena," said Sebastian, surprising everyone in the room, including Elena herself. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Julian and Victoria exchanged incredulous looks, while Elena felt the blood rush to her face. "You've completely lost your mind," said Julian slowly. "Marrying a maid, that's degrading to the family name." "And completely unnecessary," added Victoria. "Sebastian, dear, be reasonable. Better to lose the inheritance with dignity than to tarnish the Sterling name with an inappropriate marriage." Eleanor felt a mixture of anger and humiliation rising in her chest. "I haven't accepted any proposal yet," she said, looking directly at Sebastian. "And even if I do, it wouldn't be to please or displease anyone here. It would be my decision." "What audacity!" exclaimed Victoria. "Sebastian, do you see the kind of person you're thinking of associating with?" Sebastian positioned himself beside Elena, his expression hardening. "I see an honest, hard-working, dignified woman, something that, unfortunately, I don't always find in people of our own social class." Julian laughed with disdain. "Honest? Sebastian, you know nothing about her true origins. Do you know where her family came from? Do you know if there's no trouble in the past?" "Watch your words, Julian," warned Sebastian, his voice taking on a dangerous tone. Elena headed for the door, but Sebastian gently held her by the arm. "Don't leave, not because of them. Mr. Raphael, maybe your cousins are right. Maybe this idea is too hasty." Mrs. Martha appeared at the door of the room, her expression worried. The 60-year-old woman had grey hair tied in a simple bun and hands marked by decades of hard work. "Eleanor, my dear, can I speak with you for a minute?" "Of course, Mama." The two stepped away into the hallway, leaving Sebastian alone with his cousins. "Mama, did you hear the conversation?" whispered Elena. "I heard part of it. And I want you to know something, my daughter. In all these years working here, I've seen how young Sebastian treats you. He's not like the other bosses we've had before. He respects you, he values you. But, Mama, that doesn't mean he truly wants to marry me. He's desperate because of the inheritance." Mrs. Martha held her daughter's face between her hands. "My dear, sometimes the best decisions in life are made in moments of despair, because that's when the masks come off and people show who they really are. And what if I accept and regret it later? What if he rejects me when the crisis passes? And what if you don't accept and spend the rest of your life wondering what could have happened?" Elena looked out the window, seeing the green fields she had known since childhood. Every fence, every road, every building held memories of her entire life. "Do you think I should accept? I think you should follow your heart. But also think with your head. This estate is not just the home of the two of you. It is the home of more than 200 people who depend on it to survive." Back in the living room, Julian was trying to convince Sebastian that there were other solutions. "Cousin, We still have a few hours. We can try to find some young woman willing to enter a marriage of convenience, someone of a better social standing. There isn't enough time for that, and you know it. Besides, I've already made my decision. So you're willing to throw away 200 years of family tradition because of a whim? Asked Victoria bitterly. I'm willing to save 200 years of family tradition by doing whatever is necessary. Eleanor returned to the living room with Mrs. Martha, who made a respectful bow to everyone. Mr. Sebastian, may I have a private word with you? Of course, Mrs. Martha. She approached him, speaking in a low voice but audible to all. Sir, I've known my daughter since she was born. She is an honourable, hard-working young woman who has always respected this house and this family. If you are thinking of marrying her, I want you to know that it will not be out of self-interest or ambition on her part. I know that, Mrs. Martha. I've always known. And I also want you to know that if she accepts, it will be because she saw in you a man of character. My Elena has good judgment of people. Julian rolled his eyes, impatient with the conversation. What a touching scene. But let's be practical. Sebastian, even if you marry her today, the other family members may question the validity of the marriage. They may claim it was done under pressure, that it isn't genuine. The will doesn't specify anything about genuineness. It only requires that the marriage be legal and registered. But it does specify consummation, said Victoria with a mischievous smile. Did you read the full clause, cousin? Sebastian turned pale. He had read the document quickly, focusing on the part about age and marriage, but he hadn't paid attention to the finer details. What do you mean? Victoria took the will from his hands, searching for a specific passage. Here it is. The marriage must be legal, registered, and consummated according to Christian customs, attested by the word of the betrothed before worthy witnesses. Did you leave that part out for the young woman? Eleanor felt her blood run cold. The situation was becoming even more complicated and embarrassing than she had imagined. I didn't have time to read all the details, admitted Sebastian, visibly shaken. How convenient, said Julian with sarcasm. So you are asking this young woman not only to pretend to be your wife, but also to— That's enough, interrupted Elena, her voice trembling with indignation. Mr. Sebastian, you deceived me. You omitted important information. Elena, I swear it wasn't intentional. I was so desperate that— I don't want to hear excuses. If you can't be honest with me from the start, how can I trust anything you say? She headed for the door again, but this time Sebastian didn't try to stop her. He knew he had made a serious mistake. Elena, give me a chance to explain properly, to be completely transparent with you. I think you've explained enough already. Mrs. Martha watched her daughter leave the room and addressed Sebastian with a serious expression. Mr. Sebastian, if you'll allow an old servant the boldness— My daughter is not an object to be used. If you have true feelings for her, you need to show them honestly. If it's just convenience, you'd better leave her alone. Julian and Victoria exchanged satisfied glances, thinking the situation had resolved in their favor. Well, cousin, I think this concludes our discussion. How about we start planning the transition of the estate, suggested Julian. There's nothing to plan. I still have a few hours, and I'll use them to find a solution. Sebastian, be sensible, insisted Victoria. Even if you convince the girl to accept, even if you manage to get married today, you'll still have to face legal challenges. Julian and I hired a lawyer who's coming here this afternoon to assess the situation. You did what? It was necessary to protect the family's interests, Doctor. Barnaby Finch is a specialist in inheritance law. He's going to examine every comma of that will. Sebastian understood that his cousins weren't there to support him. They were there to make sure he failed, so they could claim pieces of the inheritance. I see, so you really want me to lose the estate. We want you to be realistic, said Julian. This property is too big for one person. We've always thought it should be divided among the living heirs. The will is clear. The property passes entirely to the direct heir who fulfills the requirements. But if the direct heir can't fulfill the requirements— Victoria left the sentence hanging with a calculating smile. Sebastian left the room, leaving his cousins alone. He needed to find Elena and have an honest conversation with her, without omitting any detail, even if that meant accepting her final refusal. He found her in the back garden, sitting on a stone bench where she used to rest during work breaks. She was feeding the birds with breadcrumbs, an activity that always calmed her. "May I sit down?" he asked respectfully. Elena didn't answer, but she also didn't get up to leave. Sebastian took that as silent permission. "I want to apologize for the way I handled our conversation. You're right, I wasn't completely honest. And why should it be any different now? Because I have nothing left to lose, because if you say no, I'll have to accept the consequences." Elena continued feeding the birds, avoiding looking at him. "Tell me the whole truth, without omitting anything." Sebastian took a deep breath and began to tell her everything he had discovered about the will. The age clause, the marriage requirement, the part about consummation, the arrival of his cousins, the hiring of the lawyer. "And you really believe a forced marriage can solve all these problems?" "I believe you and I can decide together how to face each obstacle, not as employer and employee, but as partners." "Partners? Elena, may I confess something I've never told anyone?" She finally looked at him, curious. "I've always had feelings for you, ever since you grew up and became the admirable woman you are today. I never said anything because I knew about the differences between us, because I didn't want you to think you were being harassed or coerced. And now you're coercing me. Now I'm being honest about my feelings, even knowing they might be rejected, because the situation forced me to stop pretending." Elena tossed the last crumbs to the birds and stood up. "Mr. Sebastian, even if I believed your feelings, even if I returned them, that doesn't solve the practical aspects of the situation. Your cousins are right about one thing. A marriage like this can be legally challenged. Then help me make it unchallengeable." "How?" "Marry me not out of obligation, but because you want to try, because you believe we can build something real together." Elena walked a few steps, gazing at the big house where she had spent half her life. "And what about the consummation part?" Sebastian visibly blushed. "That would be your decision. Ours. I would never force or demand something like that from you. If you agreed to marry me, we'd take things at our own pace with our mutual consent. And your cousins? And the lawyer they hired? We'll face them together. If you're on board, it won't just be my problem anymore. It'll be our problem." Elena turned to face him directly. "I need a few hours to think, and I need to talk to my mother. Take all the time you need. But Elena, thank you for at least considering it." When Sebastian returned to the house, he found Julian and Victoria chatting animatedly with a heavy-set man with a grey mustache, dressed in a dark suit and carrying a document briefcase. "Ah, Cousin Sebastian, this is Dr. Barnaby Finch, the lawyer we mentioned. Dr. Finch stood up and extended his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Pierce, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your cousins told me about the peculiar situation you find yourself in. Doctor, I appreciate your coming, but I didn't request your services. Actually, I was hired to protect the legitimate interests of the entire Sterling family, and frankly, I'm concerned about some irregularities I've already identified." Sebastian crossed his arms, wary. "What kind of irregularities?" Dr. Finch opened his briefcase and pulled out a copy of the will, covered in notes and markings. "First, there are problems with the authentication of this document. The testator's signature doesn't perfectly match other signatures of his that I managed to locate in the registries. That's impossible. The document was found in my great-grandfather's personal files. Second," the lawyer continued, ignoring the objection, "the marriage clause itself can be challenged as antiquated and incompatible with current constitutional rights." "What are you insinuating?" "I'm suggesting that this will may be a fraud. An elaborate forgery created by someone interested in complicating the natural succession of the estate." Julian and Victoria feigned surprise, but Sebastian could tell they weren't truly shocked by the revelation. "You knew about this?" "Cousin, we just wanted to protect you from making rash decisions based on questionable documents," said Victoria with false concern. "And if the will is deemed false, then the inheritance will follow the normal laws of succession," explained Dr. Finch. "The estate will be divided among all the legitimate heirs of the Sterling lineage." Sebastian felt a mix of relief and suspicion. If the will really was fake, he wouldn't need to marry to keep the inheritance. But something about his cousin's attitude deeply troubled him. How long would it take to prove the document is a forgery? With the proper procedures? A few weeks? But I can petition the court to issue an order suspending any attempt to enforce the clauses until the authenticity is verified. And during that time? During this time, the estate remains under court administration, ensuring that no hasty decisions are made. Sebastian understood the plan. His cousins had created a situation where he could neither marry to fulfill the will nor keep the estate while the matter was being resolved. It was a clever and cruel strategy. I need time to consider this information. Naturally. But Mr. Sebastian, I recommend you not take any drastic action in the coming hours. Hasty marriages in situations like this can be annulled and create even greater legal complications. After Dr. Finch left, Sebastian was alone with his cousins in the room. You planned this from the very beginning, didn't you? We planned to protect the family's interests, Julian said coldly. Protect or usurp? Sebastian, be honest with yourself, said Victoria. Do you really believe you can manage an estate this size on your own? It would be far more sensible to divide the responsibility among capable people. People like you? Among others, yes. Sebastian left the room without answering. He needed to think clearly about his options, and the presence of his cousins kept him from reasoning lucidly. On his way to his room, he crossed paths with Elena in the hallway. She was carrying clean clothes and seemed lost in thought. Elena, may I speak with you once more? Of course. A new complication has come up. My cousins brought a lawyer who claims the will may be fake. Elena stopped and looked at him in confusion. Fake? If it's true, it means I don't need to get married to keep the inheritance. The estate would simply follow the normal laws of succession. And would that be good for you, sir? It would be good if I trusted my cousin's intentions, but I think they're trying to create a situation where the estate will be in legal dispute for months, perhaps years. What are you going to do? Sebastian hesitated before answering. Elena, may I ask a very personal question? You may. If there were no issue of inheritance, if I were just an ordinary man asking you to marry me, what would your answer be? Elena felt her heart race. It was a question that went to the very core of feelings she had been trying to ignore for years. Why are you asking this? Because I'm beginning to realize that perhaps the inheritance isn't the most important thing here. Perhaps it's just an excuse to do something I should have done a long time ago. What thing? To declare my feelings for you, regardless of the circumstances. Eleanor set the clothes down on a nearby table and looked deeply into his eyes. Mr. Sebastian, if there were no issue of money, inheritance, or pressure, I would say that I have feelings for you too. Feelings I've been hiding because I knew they were impossible. Why impossible? Because we're from different worlds, because people would say I'm a gold digger, because I myself would doubt my own motivations. And now? Now I'm confused. I don't know if my feelings are real or if they're mixed up with the pressure of the situation. Sebastian stepped closer to her but kept a respectful distance. Then let me propose something different. Forget the inheritance for a moment. Forget the deadlines, the cousins, the lawyers. If you wanted to try something with me, something real, would you be willing? Try how? By dating first, getting to know each other for real. No rush, no pressure. Elena smiled for the first time in that entire conversation. That would be different. It would be honest. It would be the right way. At that moment, Mrs. Martha appeared in the hallway, carrying a basket of dirty laundry. Excuse me, Mr. Sebastian. Elena, I need to speak with you in the laundry room. Of course, Mother. Actually, Mrs. Martha, may I accompany you both? There are a few things I'd like to clarify with both of you. The laundry room was at the back of the house, a spacious area with stone sinks and wooden clotheslines. Mrs. Martha set down the basket and looked seriously at Sebastian. Sir, I overheard part of the conversation you had with my daughter a little while ago, and I need to tell you something. Please, speak freely, Mrs. Martha. In all these years working in this house, I've learned to observe people. I've seen how you look at my Elena, how you treat her differently from the other servants. This isn't new. Elena looked at her mother in surprise. Mother, you never said anything to me about this, because it wasn't my place to interfere. But now that Mr. Sebastian has been honest about his feelings, I think I can be honest too. What do you mean? Mrs. Martha turned to Sebastian. Sir, my daughter has feelings for you too. She has for a long time. I've always known, even though she tried to hide it. Elena blushed deeply. Mother, it's true, dear. How many times did I catch you looking out the window when he rode by on horseback? How many times did you ask about him during dinner? Sebastian smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and tenderness. So we were both hiding the same feelings? It seems so, Elena admitted timidly. And now? What do we do with this discovery? Mrs. Martha interjected into the conversation with the authority of a woman who had raised her daughter alone. Now you both stop worrying about what others will think and follow your hearts. Life is too short to waste true love. But Mother, the situation is complicated. The inheritance, his cousins, the social differences. Daughter, when I married your father, he was a landless field hand, and I was the daughter of a small shopkeeper. Both families were against it, but we loved each other, and that was enough to overcome every obstacle. And did it work out? It worked out until the day he passed. And even with all the pain of losing him, I don't regret a single day we spent together. Sebastian watched the exchange between mother and daughter with admiration. He could see that Mrs. Martha was a wise woman, forged by difficult experiences, but not embittered by them. Mrs. Martha, may I ask for your blessing to court your daughter properly? Mr. Sebastian, you've always had my approval. I've always seen that you're a man of character. And Elena? Would you give me a chance to prove that my feelings are true? Elena looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly, and then at Sebastian. Yes. I'd like to try, even knowing it might be difficult, that we'll have to face prejudice and gossip, especially because of that. If we're going to be together, it's better that it's because we truly want to be, not out of convenience. Sebastian stepped closer to her, and for the first time took her hand without the pretext of a desperate situation. Then let's forget, for a moment, all this confusion about the inheritance. Let's have dinner together tonight, like two people who are getting to know each other. In the main dining room. Why not? It's my house. I can dine with whoever I please. Mrs. Martha smiled, pleased with how the conversation was going. And what about the inheritance matter, Mr. Sebastian? You still have a few hours to decide. Honestly, I'm beginning to think the inheritance isn't worth it if I have to give up my integrity to keep it. What do you mean? If my cousins are willing to use lawyers and dishonest strategies to stop me from fulfilling the will, maybe I shouldn't fight so hard to keep something they want to divide up. Elena grew concerned at the resignation in his voice. But Mr. Sebastian, this estate is your life. Your family built all of this. My family built it, but if I'm not able to keep it with dignity, maybe I don't deserve to have it. Mrs. Martha shook her head in disagreement. Mr. Sebastian, with all due respect, that's the talk of a discouraged man. You have every right to fight for what's yours. But how? If the will really is false, I can't get married just to fulfill it. And if it's real, my cousins will question any marriage I make today. Eleanor had a sudden idea. What if the will is neither true nor false? What if it's complicated? What do you mean? Mother always tells stories about the old owners of this house, about your great-grandfather, Arthur Sterling. He was known for being very eccentric. Eccentric how? Mrs. Martha nodded, recalling the stories. Old Arthur was known for creating complicated situations to test people's character. They say he hid several versions of his will throughout the house. Several versions? The story I've always heard is that he wanted to make sure whoever inherited the estate would be worthy of it. So he created different versions of the will, each with different requirements. Sebastian grew excited at the possibility. Do you think there might be a version of the will that my cousins don't know about? It's possible. Old Arthur was known for hiding important documents in unlikely places. Where? Mrs. Martha thought for a moment. Well, the library would be the obvious place, but there was also talk that he used to hide things in the estate's chapel. The chapel. It's been abandoned for decades. Exactly why it might be a good hiding spot. Eleanor grew enthusiastic about the idea. It's worth looking. At the very least, we'll know we've explored every possibility. Sebastian glanced at his watch. They still had a few hours before the deadline. Would you two be willing to help me look? Of course, said Elena. It would be a pleasure, Mr. Sebastian, agreed Mrs. Martha. The three left the laundry room with renewed purpose. They had a mission, to find evidence that could completely change the course of events. The house's library was an impressive setting, with mahogany bookshelves stretching from floor to ceiling, filled with old books and family documents. Sebastian, Elena, and Mrs. Martha began a systematic search, examining every shelf, every drawer, every space that could hide papers. Here's something interesting, said Elena, pulling a leather folder from behind some thick books. It's very old, and it has the name Arthur Sterling engraved on the cover. Sebastian opened the folder carefully. It contained several letters and document drafts, all handwritten in his great-grandfather's peculiar script. This letter here is interesting, he said, reading aloud. My dear great-grandson, if you're reading this, it means you've found my true will. The document I left with the lawyer is merely a test. Elena and Mrs. Martha drew closer, eager to hear the rest. I've always believed that a man's true worth is revealed not in times of ease, but in times of adversity. If you are desperately searching for alternatives, if you are willing to make sacrifices for the sake of the people who depend on this estate, then you are worthy of inheriting it. Keep reading, Elena urged, but if you are only concerned with your own situation, if you are willing to use other people as instruments for your own ends, then this estate should go to someone who truly cares about it. Sebastian stopped reading, troubled by the letter's message. What's wrong, Mr. Sebastian? It's as if he knew exactly what I'd be thinking, as if he predicted I'd consider using someone to solve my problem. Mrs. Martha gently took the letter from his hands. May I read the rest? Please. The true test of character lies not in marrying out of obligation, but in marrying for love. If you have found someone you love and who loves you in return, someone who is willing to share both the joys and the hardships of your life, then you have my blessing. But if you're just looking for a convenient solution, then you deserve neither the estate nor the person you're trying to use. Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. It was as if the old patriarch were speaking directly to them through time. Is there anything else? Yes, Mrs. Martha continued. The true will is kept in the chapel, on the altar, but it should only be used by someone who truly understood the value of love and mutual sacrifice. If you're reading this merely out of desperation, stop here. If you're reading this out of true love, continue your search. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Sebastian looked at Elena, seeing in her eyes the same understanding he felt. He was testing whether I could distinguish between convenience and true love, Sebastian murmured. And could you? I think so. When I suggested we forget the inheritance and try something real, I felt that was what he wanted me to discover. Elena smiled, touched by the depth of the moment. So shall we go to the chapel? Let's go. The chapel stood about 200 yards from the main house, surrounded by old trees that created a solemn and mystical atmosphere. The small stone building had been erected by Arthur Sterling Pierce himself in the early part of the last century, but had been gradually abandoned over the decades. Sebastian forced the wooden door, which creaked in protest against the rusty hinges. The interior was covered in dust and cobwebs, but the structure remained solid. The altar is right up there, said Elena, pointing to a stone table adorned with religious symbols. They approached cautiously. The altar had several small drawers on its sides, all secured with little metal latches. I'll try opening these drawers, said Sebastian, using a pocket knife to gently pry the latches. The first drawer contained only old religious objects, a wooden rosary, some worn-out candles, a small leather-bound Bible. The second drawer was empty. In the third drawer they found an envelope sealed with red wax marked with the Sterling family seal. This must be it, said Sebastian, his hands trembling slightly. Open it, Elena encouraged. Sebastian carefully broke the seal and removed a document several pages long, written in the same handwriting as the previous letter. "True last will and testament of Arthur Sterling Pierce," he read aloud. "What does it say?" Sebastian read silently for a few minutes, his expression shifting from anxiety to relief, and finally to surprise. "Elena, you won't believe what's written here. Tell me. According to this will, the estate is to be inherited by the direct descendant who demonstrates the ability to love truly and to place the well-being of the estate's employees above their own interests. And how is that determined? By a vote. All employees who have worked on the estate for more than 5 years are entitled to vote on whether they believe the heir is worthy of the inheritance." Mrs. Martha chuckled softly. Old Arthur was truly a man ahead of his time. "But there's more," Sebastian continued. "If the heir marries, the spouse automatically becomes co-owner of the inheritance regardless of their social background or financial situation." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Co-owner? With equal decision-making rights over all aspects of managing the estate. That means... It means that if we got married, it wouldn't just be a marriage to save the inheritance. You would literally become the owner of this estate as much as I would." Mrs. Martha shook her head in admiration. That man really knew how to test people's character. "There's one last part," said Sebastian. "The will is only valid if the wedding takes place in the estate's chapel, officiated by the staff themselves, and with the free and willing consent of both parties." Elena felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Sebastian, do you still want to marry me, now that you know it wouldn't just be to save the inheritance?" Sebastian knelt in the small chapel, taking Elena's hands in his. "Elena Grace Miller, I love you, not out of convenience, not out of desperation, but because you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever met. If you agree to marry me, I promise it will be a true partnership in every sense, and I promise it will be for love, not for gain." "Mrs." Martha cried with emotion, watching her daughter experience a moment she herself had dreamed of decades before. "So, is it a yes?" "It's a yes." Sebastian stood up and kissed her tenderly, sealing a commitment that had begun in desperation but had grown into something genuine and profound. "Now we need to go back and face your cousins," said Elena. "Now we'll go back and show the real will, and then we'll get married, right here in the chapel, with the blessing of all the staff. And the lawyer they hired? He'll have to swallow his pride and accept that old Arthur was smarter than all of us." When they returned to the main house, they found Julian and Victoria talking anxiously with Dr. Finch in the living room. The three stopped talking abruptly when they saw Sebastian walk in. "Cousin, where have you been?" "We were worried," said Victoria with feigned concern. "I was at the chapel with Elena and Mrs. Martha, and we found something very interesting." Sebastian placed the real will on the table, watching the expressions of the three shift from confidence to apprehension. "What is that?" asked Dr. Finch, picking up the document. "The real will of my great-grandfather. What you found was just a test." The lawyer quickly read the first pages, his expression growing more and more troubled. This is impossible. How do we know it's not a forgery?" "Because it's sealed with the official family stamp and has several authenticity marks that can be verified. But if you have doubts, feel free to submit it for forensic examination." Julian took the document from the lawyer's hands and read it with growing irritation. "A vote? Arthur made the inheritance dependent on the opinion of the employees?" "Not all of the employees. Only those who have worked here for more than 5 years and know the heir's character well." Victoria laughed nervously. "Sebastian, you can't be serious. Are you really going to put your future in the hands of the staff's judgment?" "I am. Because I'm certain they are better judges of character than anyone in this room." "And what if they vote against you?" "Then it will mean I don't truly deserve this inheritance." Dr. Finch examined the document more closely. "Mr. Sebastian, even if this will is authentic, there are complex legal issues involved. The idea of giving voting power to the employees could be challenged in court." "Challenged by whom? By lawyers hired by people who want to usurp a legitimate inheritance?" "Challenged by anyone interested in protecting the established legal order." Sebastian looked firmly at the lawyer. Dr. Finch, you were hired by my cousins to prevent me from fulfilling the will's requirements, weren't you? I was hired to protect the legitimate interests of the entire Sterling family. Then you'll be glad to know that I intend to fulfill exactly the requirements of the real will. I will marry today right here on the estate Elena Miller, and then we will submit our union to the employee's approval. You've completely lost your mind, said Julian angrily. Marrying a servant was bad enough, but now you want to give her equal rights over the estate? Elena is not merely an employee. She is the woman I love, and she will become my partner in every aspect of life. Victoria looked at Elena with disdain. And you, young lady, do you truly believe you are prepared to manage an estate of this magnitude? Eleanor lifted her chin with dignity. Mrs. Victoria, I have worked on this estate for over 10 years. I know every employee, every process, every need. Perhaps I do not have your formal education, but I have something you have never had, genuine love for this place and for the people who live here. What impertinence! It is not impertinence, it is the truth. And if the employees agree with Sebastian, it will be because they recognize that truth. Mrs. Martha, who had remained silent, addressed those present. If you will allow me, I would like to say a few words. Of course, Mrs. Martha, said Sebastian. I have worked in this house for 15 years. I watched this young man grow up. I saw how he treats his employees, how he cares for everyone's well-being. And I saw how my daughter devoted herself to this estate as if it were her own family. And I can assure you there is no couple more suited to care for this inheritance, because they do not see merely an estate, they see a home for more than 200 people. Dr. Finch closed his briefcase with resignation. Well, if you are determined to follow this path, I cannot stop you. But let it be recorded that I warned you about the potential legal complications. Recorded, said Sebastian. And now, if you will excuse me, I have a wedding to arrange. Julian and Victoria left the room without saying goodbye, clearly irritated by the turn of events. Dr. Finch followed them, muttering something about procedural irregularities. Well, it seems it's just our family now, said Sebastian, looking at Elena and Mrs. Martha. Our family? If you are willing to be part of it. Elena smiled, finally feeling secure in her decision. I am more than willing. Then let us get married. News of the impending wedding spread quickly among the estate's employees. Within hours, all the longest-serving workers had gathered in the small chapel, hastily decorated with wildflowers picked from the gardens. Abraham, the estate's most senior foreman, was chosen to officiate the ceremony. At 65 years old, he was respected by all as a fatherly and wise figure. Sebastian Sterling, do you take Elena Miller as your wife, to love and respect her in all circumstances of life? I do. Elena Miller, do you take Sebastian Sterling as your husband, to be his companion and partner in all joys and hardships? I do. Then before this community that knows and respects you, I now declare you husband and wife. The kiss they shared was enthusiastically applauded by all present. There were no expensive flowers, no hired musicians, no distinguished guests, but there was something far more precious, the genuine love of people who truly cared about them. After the ceremony, Abraham asked for everyone's attention. As you know, the will of old Arthur requires that we, the long-time employees, vote on whether we consider this marriage worthy of inheriting the estate. Murmurs of approval rippled through the group. Does anyone have any objection to Sebastian and Elena as our employers? Complete silence. Would anyone like to speak in favor? Abigail, the head cook, stood up. I have worked here for 20 years. I watched Sebastian grow up from a boy. He has always been respectful, fair, and concerned with the well-being of all of us. And Elena is like a daughter to all of us. I know of no one more deserving of this responsibility. Caleb Walker, the man in charge of house maintenance, also spoke up. My family has worked here for 3 generations. We have never had better employers. Sebastian and Elena have our full support. One by one, all the employees present expressed their approval. There was not a single dissenting voice. Then it is decided, declared Abraham. By unanimous agreement, We recognize Sebastian and Elena as our rightful masters." Applause echoed through the chapel, mingled with tears of emotion and joy. Elena felt overwhelmed by the demonstration of affection and trust. She had never imagined that one day she would be accepted not only as a wife, but as a leader of that community. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I promise we will never disappoint the trust you have placed in us. And I promise that this estate will always be managed with the well-being of everyone who works here as the first priority," added Sebastian. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now, continuing. When they returned to the main house after the celebration, they found Julian and Victoria packing their bags, clearly preparing to leave. "You're leaving already?" asked Sebastian. "There is nothing left for us here," Julian replied coldly. "You made your choice. And you made yours when you tried to prevent me from inheriting the estate." Victoria stopped packing her things and looked directly at Elena. "I hope you know what you're doing, young lady. Managing an estate of this magnitude is no child's play." "Mrs. Victoria, I appreciate your concern, but I believe I can count on the support of people who truly know this estate. We'll see how long that lasts." After the cousins' departure, Sebastian and Elena found themselves alone in the main parlor, still processing everything that had happened. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Scared, but happy. And you?" "Relieved. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm on the right path." Eleanor approached the window, gazing at the fields that stretched to the horizon. "Sebastian, may I confess something?" "Of course. I've always dreamed of truly taking care of this land, not just as an employee, but as a partner. I've always imagined how I could improve the living conditions of the workers, modernize some farming techniques, create education programs for the children in the community." Sebastian smiled, impressed by her vision. "You've thought about all of this?" "I've been thinking about it for years, but I never imagined I'd have the opportunity to put these ideas into practice. Now you do. We're partners, remember? Your ideas matter just as much as mine." Eleanor turned to face him. "Sebastian, are you sure you won't regret this? Marrying me, giving me equal rights over the estate?" He stepped closer and gently cupped her face in his hands. "Elena, you saved me from an empty life. Not just from losing the inheritance, but from the lonely life I was living. How could I ever regret that? And what if things get hard? If we face financial troubles, legal issues, social pressures? Then we'll face them together, as husband and wife, as partners, as companions in everything." They kissed again, sealing not only a romantic commitment, but a partnership that would completely transform the estate and the lives of everyone who lived there. The next morning, Sebastian woke to the sound of lively voices coming from the main courtyard. Looking out the window, he saw Elena talking with a group of workers, clearly planning something. When he came downstairs to join them, he discovered that his wife had spent the early hours of the morning putting together a detailed improvement plan for the estate. "Good morning, husband," she said with a radiant smile. "Good morning, wife. What are you all plotting here?" "Elena had a brilliant idea," said Abraham. "She wants to turn the abandoned wing of the house into a school for the workers' children." "A school?" "With literacy classes for the adults as well," added Abigail, "for those who never had the chance to study as children." Sebastian looked at Elena with growing admiration. "Where did that idea come from?" "I've always believed that education is the best way to improve people's lives, and we have plenty of extra space in the house." "And how do you plan to finance it?" "Well, that's the part where I need your approval as a partner," she said timidly. "We could use part of the estate's profits to hire a teacher and buy school supplies." "Elena, that's brilliant. You approve?" "Not only do I approve, but I want to help plan everything." Caleb Walker spoke up enthusiastically. "My children could learn to read and write. I never thought that would be possible." "All the employees' children will be able to study," said Elena. "And the adults too, if they want." "This is going to completely change the lives of this community," observed Sebastian. That's the goal. In the following weeks, the estate turned into a bustling construction site. The abandoned wing was renovated and converted into classrooms. A young, dedicated teacher was hired from the nearest town. Books and school supplies were purchased. But the changes didn't stop at education. Elena also made improvements to the employees' homes, installed a running water system in the more distant residences, and created a community garden where everyone could grow their own food. Sebastian, inspired by his wife's energy and vision, focused on modernizing the estate's farming techniques. He introduced new crop varieties, implemented more efficient irrigation systems, and established more advantageous business partnerships for selling the produce. 3 months after the wedding, the estate was nearly unrecognizable. Productivity had increased significantly, the employees were more motivated and engaged, and there was a general atmosphere of optimism and progress. "Do you see that?" said Elena to Sebastian one afternoon, pointing to the makeshift school where children and adults studied together. "I see it, and it's beautiful. Your great-grandfather would be proud." "I think he already is. Somehow he knew you were the right person to help me take care of this place." "No, Sebastian, we were the right people, together." That night, while dining alone in the main room of the house, Elena brought up a subject she had been thinking about for a few weeks. "Sebastian, can I talk about our marriage?" "Of course. Is something wrong?" "Not exactly wrong, but we got married under special circumstances. We never had time to really get to know each other as husband and wife." Sebastian set down his fork, understanding where the conversation was heading. "Are you feeling uncomfortable with our situation?" "Not uncomfortable, just uncertain. About what you expect from me, about what I expect from you." "Elena, when we got married, I promised we would take things at our own pace. That still stands. And what if I told you I'm ready to try being a true wife?" Sebastian felt his heart race. "I'd say, I'm ready to be a true husband, too. So maybe it's time we started sharing the same room, if that's what you want. It's what I want." That night, for the first time since the wedding, they slept in the same room. There was no pressure or unrealistic expectations, just the naturalness of two people who loved each other and were building a life together. The next morning, they woke up in each other's arms, feeling that they had crossed yet another important bridge in their relationship. "How do you feel?" asked Sebastian, gently stroking her hair. "I feel like we're finally truly married. In every way. In every way." 6 months after the wedding, the estate received an unexpected visit. A group of investors from New York City, led by an influential businessman named Dr. Mr. Sterling Vance arrived, interested in learning about the revolutionary innovations he had heard about regarding the estate. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," said Mr. Vance, after a guided tour of the property, "I am impressed with what you have accomplished here. Productivity has increased, the workers are satisfied, and there are social programs in place. This is exactly the kind of model we want to replicate on other properties." "Model?" asked Elena. "We would like to make a partnership proposal. We can offer capital to expand your operations and replicate your methods across a network of rural estates throughout the state." Sebastian and Eleanor exchanged cautious glances. "What kind of partnership?" "You would keep management of this estate, but you would provide consulting to implement the same system on other properties. In exchange, we offer a share in the profits of the entire network." "It's an interesting proposal," admitted Sebastian, "but we need to discuss it between ourselves." "Of course, I'll leave my card. Take your time to think it over." After the investors left, Sebastian and Elena gathered in the library to discuss the proposal. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think this could be an opportunity to help more people. If we can improve the lives of workers here, we can do the same elsewhere. But it could also complicate our lives, bring external pressures, compromise our autonomy." Elena reflected for a moment. "Sebastian, do you remember when your great-grandfather wrote that a man's true worth is revealed in moments of adversity?" "I remember. Perhaps the true worth of our work here will be revealed when we have the opportunity to expand it to help more people. Do you think we should accept?" "I think we should study the proposal carefully. If we can maintain our principles and autonomy, it may be worth it. In the following weeks, they carefully negotiated the terms of the partnership. They established clauses guaranteeing that each property in the network would maintain autonomy to decide on social programs and worker treatment. They also required an active role in decisions about which properties would be included in the network. The partnership was formally established 6 months later, and Sebastian and Elena became specialized consultants in humane management of rural estates, a concept they themselves had developed. 2 years after their marriage, they were overseeing the implementation of their methodologies across 15 different properties, improving the lives of more than 3,000 rural workers and their families. "Did you ever imagine our story would come this far?" asked Elena during a trip to oversee a new property. "I never imagined that a moment of despair could generate so much growth and happiness." And they also never imagined they would become examples for other couples and other estates. "The most important thing is that we never lost our essence. We remain the same team that came together in that chapel. The same team, but much stronger." During that trip, Eleanor made a revelation that would change their lives once again. "Sebastian, I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I'm pregnant." Sebastian stopped the horse abruptly. "Pregnant? 2 months along." He dismounted from the saddle and helped her down as well, embracing her with care and emotion. "Elena, this is wonderful. Are you happy?" "I'm overjoyed. We're going to have a child. A child who will grow up on an estate where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. A child who will learn from an early age about social justice and responsibility, and who will have 2 parents who truly love each other." Their son, named Arthur in honor of Sebastian's visionary great-grandfather, was born on a sunny spring day, surrounded by the affection of the entire estate community. Mrs. Martha, now promoted to head housekeeper, took on the role of grandmother with total dedication. Abraham became a sort of adoptive grandfather. Abigail prepared special foods for Elena during her breastfeeding period. Everyone contributed to creating a loving and safe environment for the child. "Just look at him," said Sebastian, holding the baby in his arms. "He's going to grow up knowing every person on this estate. He's going to learn about hard work, responsibility, and compassion from an early age. And he's going to learn that true love can overcome any obstacle," added Elena, "just like we learned." 5 years later, the story of Sebastian and Elena had become legendary in the region, not only because of the romantic transformation from servant to owner, but mainly because of the social revolution they had promoted in rural management. Their methodology was being studied at universities. Politicians visited the estate to understand how they had managed to combine economic productivity with social justice. Journalists wrote articles about the Sterling model of rural management. But for them, the most important thing remained everyday life on the estate. The employees who now knew how to read and write, thanks to the school Elena had created. The children who were growing up with opportunities their parents had never imagined. The united and prosperous community they had built together. "Do you regret anything?" asked Elena during an evening walk with little Arthur. "I regret taking so long to confess my feelings for you. And I regret thinking I wasn't worthy of your love. Looking back, I think everything happened at the right time. We needed to go through that crisis to discover who we really were, and to discover what kind of life we wanted to build." Little Arthur ran ahead of them, playing with a dog he had adopted. It was a simple scene, but full of meaning for 2 people who had found in love the strength to transform not only their own lives, but the lives of hundreds of other people. "Elena?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing in us when I myself had doubts. And thank you for showing me that true love knows no social barriers." "Forever?" "Forever." At sunset that day, they returned to the big house that was now truly a home, not only for them, but for an entire community that had learned that dignity, respect, and opportunity can flourish when planted in soil of true love. The story that had begun with despair and an impossible deadline had turned into a saga of love, growth, and social transformation that would continue to inspire future generations. 10 years after the wedding, Sebastian and Elena were overseeing the construction of a rural university on the estate. an ambitious project that would offer technical and higher education courses to young people from working families throughout the region. "Remember when it all started with a simple literacy school?" said Elena, watching the construction. "And now we're building a university. Who would have thought? Your great-grandfather. He knew we were destined to do great things." "No, Sebastian. He knew that true love is capable of doing great things." Little Arthur, now 5 years old, ran up to them carrying a piece of paper with a drawing. "Mommy, Daddy, I drew a picture of our house." The drawing showed the big house surrounded by figures of people, workers, students, families, all smiling and holding hands. "It's beautiful, son," said Elena. "You drew our family." "Our whole family." "Our whole family," confirmed Sebastian, looking at the estate that stretched to the horizon, full of life, purpose, and hope. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot since we're just starting out. Now continuing, 15 years had passed since that desperate day when Sebastian had begged Elena to marry him. The estate was now recognized nationally as a model of sustainable rural development and social justice. The university they had built had graduated its first class of agricultural technicians and rural administrators, all committed to the principles of humanized management that Sebastian and Elena had developed. Young Arthur, now a 15-year-old teenager, studied at the estate's own university, showing particular interest in the social aspects of rural administration. "Dad, do you think I'll be able to continue your work when I grow up?" he asked during a family dinner. "Son, you don't need to continue our work," Sebastian replied. "You need to find your own path to make a difference in the world." "But I want to make a difference here, at this estate, with these people." Elena smiled, seeing in her son the same passion for social justice that had driven her own life. "Arthur, what matters isn't where you work, but how you work. If you hold on to the values you've learned here, respect, compassion, justice, you can make a difference anywhere." "And what if I decide I want to be a lawyer who defends rural labor rights?" Sebastian and Elena exchanged surprised and proud glances. "Then you'll have our full approval and support," said Sebastian. "And our certainty that you'll do an excellent job," added Elena. That night, after Arthur had gone to sleep, Sebastian and Elena sat on the porch of the house, gazing at the lights shining from the employees' homes scattered across the estate. "Do you think we made the right choices?" asked Elena. "Looking at those lights, at the families having dinner in decent homes, at the children studying, how could I have any doubts? Sometimes I wonder what our lives would have been like if we had made different decisions. Easier, perhaps, simpler, but not more meaningful." Elena nestled into the crook of Sebastian's arm. "I regret nothing, not the hard times, not the challenges, not the uncertainties. Neither do I, because everything brought us here. And here is exactly where we want to be." 20 years after their marriage, Sebastian and Elena celebrated their porcelain anniversary with a grand party at the estate. Hundreds of people came to celebrate with them, former employees who had moved to other regions, students who had graduated from the rural university, politicians and academics who drew inspiration from their work. But the most moving moment of the party came when Abraham, now 85 years old, asked to speak. "My friends, 20 years ago I officiated the marriage of Sebastian and Elena at this very estate. Back then some doubted whether that union would work out. Today, looking at everything they have built together, I can say it was the most successful marriage I have ever witnessed." Applause echoed across the estate. But the success of Sebastian and Elena is not measured only by the love they share for one another. It is measured by the love they have spread throughout this entire community, by all the lives they have touched and transformed. They proved that when two people come together with noble purposes, they can change not only their own lives, but the world around them. Sebastian stood up to respond. "Abraham, dear friends, when Elena agreed to marry me on that desperate day 20 years ago, I thought I was saving only an inheritance. In truth, I was saving my soul. Elena taught me that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we share, not in what we accumulate, but in what we build for others. And together, we learned that true love is not merely a feeling between two people. It is a force that can transform entire communities. Elena also stood up. When I agreed to marry Sebastian, I was afraid I wouldn't be worthy of so much love and trust. Today, I know that dignity isn't something you're born with. It's something you earn every day through your choices and actions. This estate, this community, this university, all of it is proof that when we work together with love and mutual respect, there's no limit to what we can achieve. The celebration continued into the wee hours, with music, dancing, and stories about the old days. But the moment Sebastian and Elena treasured most was when they found themselves alone in the chapel where they had been married 2 decades earlier. "Remember how nervous I was that day," said Elena, "and I was desperate, thinking the world was coming to an end. Actually, it was a whole new world that was beginning. Our world." They kissed once more at the same altar where they had sealed their commitment 20 years before, but now with the wisdom and depth of those who had built a truly meaningful life. 25 years after the wedding, Sebastian and Elena faced their first major marital crisis, not from a lack of love, but from an excess of responsibilities and external pressures. The rural university had grown so much that it attracted the attention of major corporations interested in acquiring it. Politicians were pushing for even greater expansion. International organizations wanted to replicate the model in other countries. "I'm tired, Sebastian," Elena confessed one night. "I feel like we've lost control over what we've created. I feel overwhelmed too. This isn't how we imagined our lives would be when we started out. Maybe it's time for us to step back a little, to return to our roots. But how do we do that without disappointing all the people who depend on our work?" It was the first time in decades that they felt truly lost about which path to take. The solution came from an unexpected source. Arthur, now a trained lawyer specializing in agrarian law, had returned to the estate with a proposal. "Father, Mother, I've been watching you struggle with all these external pressures, and I have a suggestion." "We're listening," said Sebastian. "What if we turned our university and our projects into an independent foundation? You would continue as advisors and mentors, but you wouldn't have the operational responsibility for everything anymore. A foundation? With professional management, diversified funding, and the autonomy to grow without overwhelming you. You'd focus on what you do best, inspiring and guiding others." Elena and Sebastian considered the proposal for several weeks. It would mean giving up direct control over everything they had built, but it would also mean the freedom to focus on what truly motivated them. "What do you think?" asked Sebastian. "I think our son inherited his great-grandfather's wisdom. He's offering a solution that protects our principles but frees us from the administrative pressures. And do you trust him to lead this transition?" "I do. He grew up here. He understands our values, and he has the formal education to handle complex legal matters." The transition to the foundation model took 2 years to be fully implemented. During that period, Sebastian and Elena were able to return to focusing on what they loved most: direct contact with the people of the estate and the development of new social programs. "You know what I like most about this new phase," said Elena during a walk through the estate. "What?" "We have time for each other again. Time for long conversations, for unhurried walks, for simply enjoying the life we've built. And time to dream about new projects, without the pressure of implementing them right away." Exactly. 30 years after the wedding, Sebastian and Elena celebrated their pearl anniversary at a more intimate event, with only family and their closest friends from the estate. Arthur had married Elizabeth, a lawyer who shared his passion for social justice, and together they had given Sebastian and Elena 2 adorable grandchildren, Ava, age 8, and Liam, age 5. "Grandpa Sebastian, tell the story of how you and Grandma Elena met," Ava asked during the celebration dinner. "You've heard that story 1,000 times, sweetheart." "But I love it. It's better than any movie." Sebastian looked at Elena with the same love and admiration he'd had 30 years before. "Very well. Once upon a time there was a very frightened man who was about to lose everything his family had built. And he asked a maid to marry him," Liam finished, excited. "She wasn't just any maid," Eleanor corrected. "She was a woman who had always dreamed of making a difference in the world, but never imagined she'd have that opportunity." "And they got married and lived happily ever after?" Ava asked. They got married and worked very hard to build a happy life, Arthur corrected. Happiness doesn't happen by magic. It's built every day with love, respect, and dedication. Like you built it, Dad. Like we tried to build it, son. Every day. Elena held Sebastian's hand under the table. And like you're going to keep building it, she said, looking at her grandchildren. Each in your own way, following your own dreams, but always remembering that true love is the most powerful force in the world. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us folks who are just starting out. Now, continuing. At 60 years old, Sebastian developed some health problems that forced him to slow down his work pace even further. Eleanor, at 55, took on an even greater leadership role at the foundation, showing an energy and determination that impressed everyone. Don't you think you're pushing yourself too hard? Sebastian asked one afternoon when she had spent the entire day in meetings. Someone has to keep the work we started together going. But not alone. We have Arthur. We have an excellent team at the foundation. I know. But sometimes I feel like I need to make up for your forced absence. Sebastian sat down beside her and held her hands, now marked by decades of hard work. Elena, you don't need to make up for anything. You've always been the stronger half of this partnership. Don't say that. It's true. From day one, you were the one with the most revolutionary ideas, the one who best understood people's needs, the one who could turn dreams into practical reality. We've always been a team. We were, and we still are, but a team where each person has their own strengths. Yours have always been greater than mine. Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder. Sebastian, are you afraid of the future? Of what will happen when we're no longer here to take care of all of this? No, because I look at our son, our grandchildren, all the people we've trained and inspired over the years, and I see that our legacy is secure. But will they keep our values, our principles? Elena, values and principles aren't maintained by force. They're maintained by example, and the example we set was so strong, so consistent, that it became part of the culture of this estate. You're right. Sometimes I forget that we're not indispensable. We're important, but not indispensable. And that's one of the best things we can leave behind, a project that works independently of us. 2 years later, Sebastian suffered a mild heart attack that left him hospitalized for a few weeks. It was the first time in over 3 decades that he and Elena had truly been separated for an extended period. During his recovery, Elena realized how much she had grown accustomed to sharing every decision, every worry, every joy with him. The thought that one day she might have to carry on alone haunted her. How do you feel, she asked when he finally got home. Grateful, for being alive, for having you, for having had the opportunity to build this life. And I feel scared, afraid of losing you. Elena, one day one of us is going to have to carry on without the other. It's part of life. I know, but I can't imagine what that would be like. Sebastian sat on the bed and pulled her close. It would be hard, but you would make it. Because the love we built doesn't depend only on my physical presence. It's in every decision we made together, in every project we created, in every person we helped. But I want you here with me. Forever. And I want to be here. I'll fight to be here for as long as I possibly can. But if I can't, I want you to know that you'll be okay. How can you be so sure? Because I've known you for more than 30 years. I know your strength, your determination, your ability to overcome any adversity. Eleanor cried in his arms, letting go of the fears and anxieties she had been carrying for weeks. Promise me you won't leave so soon. I promise I'll take better care of my health, and that we'll make the most of every day we have together. Sebastian's recovery was slow but complete. He strictly followed all the medical recommendations, changed his diet, established a routine of light exercise, and learned stress management techniques. Most importantly, he and Elena decided to dedicate more time to activities that truly made them happy. Long conversations on the porch, walks around the estate, time with their grandchildren, shared reading. You know what I'm appreciating the most in this new phase? Sebastian said one afternoon when they were reading together in the library. What? The simplicity. Not having a schedule full of commitments, not having the pressure to solve urgent problems every day. And being able to simply be together with no rush to get anywhere. Exactly. It took 40 years of adult life for me to learn to value these moments. Better late than never. When Sebastian was 65 and Elena was 60, they made the decision to officially retire from all foundation activities. Arthur took over as president, Elizabeth became the legal director, and a new generation of leaders began to run the projects they had started. "How do you feel about this transition?" Arthur asked during a family gathering. "Relieved," said Elena, "and proud to see how you're handling everything." "But also a little nostalgic," admitted Sebastian. "These projects were our life for decades, and they'll continue to be part of your lives. You just won't have the operational responsibility anymore." "And what are we going to do with all this free time?" asked Elena, half-jokingly. "Travel," said Elizabeth. "Visit similar projects around the world, share your experiences." "Write a book," suggested Ava, "so that other people can learn from your story." "A book?" Sebastian considered the idea. "I never thought about that." "It would be a way to further perpetuate your teachings," said Arthur. Elena looked at Sebastian with interest. "What do you think?" "I think it could be an interesting project for us to do together." "Our last big project together." "I don't know if it would be the last, but it would certainly be special." They took 2 years to write the book, working together every morning in the library at home. The process of remembering and organizing decades of experiences was both nostalgic and revealing. "Reading our story like this, organized chronologically, I'm amazed at how many transformations we went through," said Elena during a review session, "and at how many times we thought we wouldn't be able to overcome some obstacle. But we always did. We always did because we always faced everything together." The book, entitled From Despair to Love, How We Turned a Crisis into an Opportunity, was published when Sebastian was 68 years old and Elena was 63. It became a national bestseller and was translated into several languages. "Can you believe this?" said Arthur, showing them a list of invitations to speak at universities and conferences around the world. "It's surreal," said Elena. "We spent our lives working for our small community, and now people from all over the world want to hear our story." "A small community that became a global model," observed Sebastian. "Sometimes the impact of our work only becomes clear when we look at it from a distance." "Are you going to accept some of these invitations?" Elena looked at Sebastian questioningly. "What do you think? One last world tour to share our experience? Why not? Since we're retired, we might as well take the opportunity to see the world." The following 2 years were an international adventure. Lectures at Harvard, Oxford, the Sorbonne, Tokyo, Sydney. They encountered similar projects in different countries, inspired new social entrepreneurs, and were amazed by the reach their story had gained. "Did you ever imagine we'd one day be talking about our lives at a university in London?" asked Elena during a walk in Hyde Park. "I never imagined we'd leave Brazil for anything that wasn't a honeymoon. And look where we are now. And knowing that our story can inspire people in completely different cultures. Love and social justice are universal languages." Apparently so. When Sebastian turned 70 and Elena 65, they finally returned to the estate for good, satisfied that they had shared their experience with the world, but happy to be home again. "Traveling was incredible, but there's no place like home," said Elena as they watched the sunset from the porch. "I agree, and now we can enjoy all these years we built without the pressure of having to prove anything to anyone. Just enjoy. Well, we have grandchildren to raise, books to read, the estate to admire, and each other to love. Especially that." That night, lying in the bed they had shared for decades, Sebastian reflected out loud. "Eleanor, do you remember what your great-grandfather wrote about a man's true worth being revealed in times of adversity?" "Of course. I think he was right, but incomplete." "What do you mean?" "A man's true worth, or a woman's, is revealed not only in how they face adversity, but in how they use success. And we used our success to lift other people up. That's a beautiful way to see our journey. It's the only way that makes sense to me." Elena snuggled closer to him. Sebastian, do you have any regrets about our life? Only one. What? Taking so long to confess that I loved you. And I regret doubting that I deserved to be loved. But in the end, everything worked out just right. More than worked out. It was perfect in its own imperfect way. Forever? Forever. The end. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're joining us from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Elena made the right decision? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for keeping us company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories.